in the society that he sees around him in the 30s and 40s. Commonly practiced conservationism falls far short of harmony between humans and land. Harmony between humans and land involves real sacrifice on the part of humans. The typical landowner makes all of his decisions with an eye toward maximizing economic return. The best land use decision is determined by economic outcome alone. Conservation is contrary to economic, I should say reductionism. I'm trying to replace economic. Leopold uses this word economic determinism in the essay that I asked you to read, but I'm not happy with it because it sounds like you're a Marxist if you use that term. Because that's a term that Marxists are always using and other economists are using this. So I just like to describe that point of view as economic reductionism. Anyway, all right, so the conservation ethic, conservation education in his time is inadequate. The farmer who clears the woods off a 75% slope, turns his cows into the clearing, and dumps its rainfall rocks and soils into the community creek is still, if otherwise decent, a respected member of society. The problem we face is extension of the social conscience to from people to land. No important change in ethics was ever accomplished without an internal change in our intellectual emphasis, loyalties, affections, and convictions. The proof that conservation has not yet touched these foundations of conduct lies in the fact that philosophy and religion have not yet heard of it. In our attempt to make conservation easy, we have made it trivial. All right. There is no suitable substitute. Economic reductionism cannot be used as a workable land ethic for very simple, very obvious reasons. Most members of the land community, if we are holists, then we have to be concerned about all members of the land community. And yet, vast majority of members of the land community of species, wildlife, have no economic value at all. And yet, all members of the land community are vital to the stability and integrity of our ecosystems. Birds and all other species should continue as a matter of, again, this is his use of this rights language, as a matter of biotic right, regardless of the presence or absence of economic advantage to us. A system of conservation based solely on economic self-interest is hopelessly lopsided. It tends to ignore and thus eventually to eliminate many elements in the land community that lack commercial value but that are essential to its healthy functioning. An intelligent tinkerer saves all the parts. All right. And then some interesting material on this page of notes, but I don't know if we'll go over it. There is some thought that perhaps our economic system is fundamentally incompatible with the land ethic. And I think that's one thing that Leopold is railing against, is that landowners have little choice, partly due to government policy. When we get to Christopher Stone, we'll encounter a remarkable solution to this problem of landowners being under economic duress to maximize economic use of their land, which results in catastrophic consequences for the whole of the land, right? But it results in profit for the landowner, and the landowner is encouraged to seek profit by the economic system that we're all enslaved to. But occasionally government has done some things to protect our resources. Anyway, enough of that. All right, the land pyramid. This is very important. Leopold also talks about an energy circuit. And Leopold makes an empirical statement that we're going to encounter again from other thinkers. The evolution of life on Earth is characterized by steady growth of the land pyramid and expansion of the land's energy circuit. Now, I'm not a paleontologist or anybody who specializes and very knowledgeable about the history of evolution, but my understanding is that it's true that if you look at the numbers of species over a long period of time, over billions of years, the numbers of species steadily increase. Biodiversity steadily increases. And there are more species. 100 years ago, perhaps it's true still today, even after we've lost so many species in the last century. But 100 years ago, there were more species in existence than any other time. Of course, species go extinct too, but the idea is that evolution seems to be oriented toward increasing biodiversity. So perhaps evolution has some rough teleological properties, features. You know, Earth is inclined, right? One of Earth's teloi is to maximize biodiversity. Could that be? But in any event, this is important to Leopold's land ethic because essentially his ethic comes down to the claim that actions which short circuit and destabilize the energy circuit, shorten the energy circuit, are morally wrong. All right, so not all use of natural resources, of course. Leopold would be the last person to say that using natural resources is morally wrong. We can take deer, we can take fish, we can take trees, we can take token members of all kinds of species. Nothing morally problematic about hunting a deer at all from Leopold's point of view. But when we disrupt the capacity of a species or an ecosystem to renew itself, to keep itself going, then we've done something morally wrong. Human-made changes are of a different order than evolutionary changes and have effects more comprehensive than humans intend or foresee. Evolutionary changes are slow and local. They serve to lengthen the energy circuit. All right? Whereas human interventions are changes of unprecedented violence, rapidity, and scope. All right? So industrial changes are too violent, too rapid, and too far-reaching to be incorporated into the land pyramid, so they serve to shorten and disfigure the energy circuit. Right? And then, of course, we could go on and on with the list of activities which are shortening the energy circuit and making the land pyramid smaller. The combined evidence of history and ecology seems to support one general deduction. The less violent the man-made changes, the greater the probability of successful readjustment in the pyramid. Health is the capacity of the land for self-renewal. Conservation is our effort to understand and preserve this capacity. Group A conservationists regard land, rivers, forests, fish, wildlife as instruments and commodities. Group A promotes the following: resource management policies, of course, wildlife for sport and meat, predator eradication, artificial reproduction like salmon hatcheries in place of natural reproduction, monocultural tree farms instead of forests. And Group B regards land, rivers, forests, fish, wildlife, etc. as more than economic goods. Group B promotes the following resource management policies. Land, air, water, wildlife should be managed for their non-economic values. This includes a few vital non-economic instrumental values like ecosystem services, scientific and the medicinal resources in knowledge of species. Also includes aesthetic values, and lastly it might include intrinsic values. So Group B conservationists are kind of at this cusp between being anthropocentrists, right? And I like to reserve the word conservationism as a word that designates necessarily an anthropocentric. It's just part of it, all right? Conservationism is an anthropocentric. But there is this tantalizing moment in Leopold's work where he seems to be suggesting that the perspective he's really recommending to us is an ecocentric perspective, and he's suggesting that land, air, water, right, that Group B conservationist, which surely he would identify himself as a Group B conservationist, right, includes an understanding of the intrinsic values. And then that would be consistent, right, with his talk about the rights, the biotic rights of a wolf, for example. But, like I said, he never fleshes all that out. So, non-economic values could be enough just for Group B to a recognition of the importance of non-economic values will make you a Group B conservationist, but you could still be a very strong anthropocentrist, right? But if you're a Group B conservationist, you also might flirt with some ecocentric kind of notions. right? Like thinking like a mountain. That's a very ecocentric idea, right? It's kind of hippy-dippy, right? It's an exotic idea. All right. So in all these cleavages, all these differences between Group A and Group B, we see repeated the same basic paradoxes. Man the conqueror versus man the biotic citizen. Science the sharpener of his sword versus science the searchlight on his universe. Land the slave and servant versus land the collective organism. All right, so a whole new worldview. A whole new metaphysics and cosmology, too. An ethical relationship with, okay, so this is the outlook. This is kind of the end of, oh, God. All right. We've got quite a bit of time left, too. So, summarizing it, an ethical relationship with land, air, water, wildlife cannot exist without love, respect, and admiration for land, air, water, wildlife. Which is why Leopold was all about education, right? That's what education encourages. Once you develop ecological literacy, then you develop a love for the land that you know about, right? That's how you come to know a land or a species or wildlife populations, by coming to love it. And so he was all about education. He was very skeptical about government programs, about financial incentives and any kind of regulatory authority. But he thought education might be the only way. The value of land, air, water, wildlife is too broad and too deep to be described in economic terms. The key log which must be moved to release the evolutionary process for a land ethic is this: quit thinking about decent land use as solely an economic problem. Examine each question in terms of what is ethically and aesthetically right, as well as what is economically expedient. A thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It is wrong when it tends otherwise. All right. So, and I know we're actually not getting to Leopold until, we're not getting to Collicutt's essay until after the midterm. So, I guess, you're getting a little preliminary, but I don't know if I want to. And today, of course, we were supposed to just talk about, and I think we did, about wolves. It's all there in Leopold's essay, Thinking Like a Mountain. Everything you need to know, everything you need to be considering to defend your point of view, or anybody's hypothetical point of view on wolf reintroduction. Right? And there are different ways of interpreting that moment when Leopold, is looking down at the wolf. Norton has a very different interpretation, but anyway, how much more do we have to get through today? So it's coming up on Norton. All right, well, we have enough time, I think, to go through this stuff. So, Leopold, I think it's fair to argue, even though Leopold never mentions Darwin in the land ethic, Leopold does talk about Darwin throughout many of his other essays, and I believe in other essays in the Sand County Almanac, he does refer to Darwin. And it's clear that he accepts Darwin's biosocial account of the evolution of ethics. All right, by that I mean, I don't know if I went through it as slowly and carefully as I should have, but Darwin's biosocial account of the evolution of ethics is that altruistic sentiments, feelings of concern and care for unrelated human beings. Right? Obviously, we care when our own family member is struggling and suffering, right? But we also care when how did that happen, right? How does altruism emerge historically? And according to Darwin, it emerges historically because communities were selected for altruism, because altruism is essential to the survival of communities, because humans are social animals. The human individual is a weak and ineffective animal that would just die. We would die. We wouldn't live more than a couple days in the wild if we didn't have communities. So those communities that are strong survive, those communities that are weak die away. right? That's Darwin's biosocial account of the evolution of ethics. Now, Collicutt, as we'll read in a couple of weeks, identifies Darwin's account of the origin of ethics as the centerpiece of what he calls the Hume-Smith-Darwin-Leopold line of moral reasoning. The community concept is central to ethics, according to all of these thinkers. Hume and Smith, of course, are Scottish Enlightenment, 18th century thinkers. And then Darwin, of course, is the great 19th century biologist, and Leopold is the great 20th century ecologist. The community concept is central to ethics. A conception of community, of individuals unavoidably nested within communities, is central to each and every historical extension of moral concern to beings or entities which once were thought of as outside the sphere of morality. The community concept is highly adaptable. The land ethic is an evolutionary possibility and an ecological necessity. In other words, evolution has equipped humans to accept non-human elements of the natural environment as fellow members of their community. Evolution has made it possible for humans to extend compassion to land, air, water, wildlife. Such an extension is not merely possible, moreover, okay, but given the immense power of modern humans to instrumentalize, transform, and destroy land, air, water, wildlife, extension of moral concern to these entities is an ecological necessity. The biotic community is foundational to and therefore more important than the marketplace and the merely human economic community. And this is how a Leopoldian land ethicist will go about resolving conflicts over natural resources. If a use of a natural resource is undermining a biotic community's capacity to renew itself and to just, to maintain its integrity, then that natural resource use or management decision is going to be morally wrong, right? How do Leopoldian land ethicists resolve conflicts between economic concerns and ecological concerns? There's a number of examples. And this is what we wrestle with as environmental ethicists all the time. Conflicts over dolphin slaughter. Some of you might have seen that movie, The Cove, that documentary about this. I haven't seen it. I can't stomach watching this kind of cruelty. But this is a centuries-old economic practice in that island in Japan where they round up these dolphins. From a Leopoldian perspective, remember this is not an animal rights perspective, so you got to forget about all that. You don't have recourse, just as a Leopoldian, you don't have recourse to any animal rights arguments because animal rights arguments are different. These are ecosystem. Leopoldian arguments are ecosystem arguments, right? And so if this dolphin slaughter is wrong from a Leopoldian point of view, it's because it takes out too many apex predators, right? Dolphins are apex predators also, kind of like wolves, right? They're kind of like wolves of the ocean. So if it takes out too many, then it might be harming the ecosystem's capacity to renew itself, right? And then it might be morally wrong. From an animal rights point of view, of course, it's morally wrong. Just automatically, just killing even one of them is morally wrong because these are very intelligent, sensitive animals. All right, very intelligent. We don't even know. But lately, the research on dolphin communication suggests that they communicate actually like they have these biological fax machines where they use their sonar. Dolphins have very, very refined sonar capabilities. They can just send their little beacons down, to the dark, murky depths of the ocean, and the sounds come back, and they get a perfect map of exactly what's down there, right? So very, very evolved. But now it turns out that when they communicate with each other, they're actually transmitting, images through sonar. They're transmitting images so when George the dolphin talks to Sarah the dolphin, then George is actually transmitting his visual image through sound waves to Sarah's mind, that she sees what he's talking about. Isn't that something? So a whole different evolution of communication, right, that may be far more sophisticated in its possibilities than ours. We don't know, but there is something incredibly complex going on with these animals that we don't have no clue about. But someday we will, and we'll be able to communicate with these guys. They learn how to communicate with each other, like these orcas. They know how to become bilingual. When they put an orca in an aquarium with another dolphin species, these guys are just big dolphins. They're not really whales. But anyway, pretty soon they start mimicking the speech patterns of the other dolphins. So they become bilingual and they adapt, and then they start talking to each other. Anyway. All right, so bottom line in this, if you're a developer or a Republican or something, this is what upsets you. You're upset about environmentalists making the biotic community more important than the economic community. But the environmentalists seem to have pretty good reasons for doing that, because the economic community is dependent on the biotic community, and so we always have to resolve conflicts. When there's an actual conflict, then we have to resolve that conflict in favor of the biotic community. So, and Collicutt refines Leopold's maxim a little bit. Collicutt kind of rewrites it a little bit. It says the thing is wrong when it destroys the biotic community's capacity to heal and renew itself. So Leopold can be characterized as a non-anthropocentric holist. All right, so right, when we start talking about anthropocentrism versus non-anthropocentrism, we're getting into the heavy meta-ethical questions about the nature of value. All right, but so we right now we're just going to acknowledge that this exists, this non-anthropocentric holist perspective and interpretation of Leopold exists, but we're not going to worry about mastering it until after the midterm. All right, but this could well be, and usually is, interpreted as the classic statement of ecocentrism. This is what an ecocentrist believes. A thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It is wrong when it tends otherwise. Or as Collicutt reformulates it, a thing is right when it tends to disturb the biotic community only at an ecologically sustainable scale and pace, i.e. at a scale and pace which do not destroy the biotic community's capacity to renew itself. So, harvesting and making use of natural resources is never wrong in itself. It's only wrong when it disturbs the biotic community at such a rapid pace or on such a large scale that the biotic community is unable to renew itself. So again, we could go on and on with many examples of different natural resource policy decisions that clearly are eroding different biotic communities' capacities to renew themselves and could be condemned. So all these dams on the Columbia, most of them anyway. And of course, the big story of anthropogenic global climate destabilization. Humankind is acting as a geological agent within a very brief historical time period, right? 200 years, 300 years of industrial revolution, right? And yet in that mere little blip of time, historically, it's just a tiny slice of historical time, let alone geological time. It doesn't even show up, it's so tiny. But we're acting as geological agents within a very tiny slice of historical time, which is just unbelievable. Rapid changes in the chemical composition of Earth's atmosphere are destroying Earth's capacities to renew its geologic, climatic, oceanic, ecological, and biotic systems. All right, so Leopold is commonly interpreted as an ecocentrist, okay, or what you could call a holistic non-anthropocentrist or non-anthropocentric holist. Brian Norton, however, argues that Leopold is an anthropocentric holist. Leopold has also been interpreted as an environmental virtue ethicist, and that's the reading that we'll do in the very last class. At the end of the term, we'll read Philip Cafaro's essay on Leopold and Rachel Carson and Henry David Thoreau. So, in one upshot of this philosophical orientation is perhaps a Leopoldian account of the moral status of an ecological whole may lead to the conclusion that, hey, these guys should be assigned some legal rights. Because if they have moral status, then like humans have moral status, we have legal rights then, right? That follows. So if they have moral status, then perhaps we ought. And there are modern constitutions. These are two of the most recent constitutions in the world, and they have both provide for the rights of Mother Earth. And then this is just fascinating. Wait till you get to Christopher Stone's essay. It's just unbelievable what this guy was writing about and thinking about way back in the late 60s. All right. So, is Leopold an ecocentrist, or is he really just an enlightened, long-sighted conservationist? And the enlightened, long-sighted conservationist is the only version of Leopold you need to know about for the midterm, all right? The basic tension in Leopold's land ethic is that he seems to fully endorse Darwin's. Now here's a bunch of terminology, sorry about that, I even added another one. he seems to fully endorse Darwin's anthropogenic, that means generated by humans, anthropocentric, that means centered on humans, consequentialist theory of the evolution of ethics. Right? Darwin's theory of the evolution of ethics does seem to be just hopelessly anthropocentric, because he's saying that we evolve ethics to benefit human communities in the long term. Human communities flourish in the long term when they have strong senses of ethics. Right? That's what Darwin is saying. And so, if we happen to find value in protecting a climate system, then it's not because the climate system has any independent moral status, it's because of us, right? So Darwin, seems to, if you accept Darwin's evolutionary account of ethics, then you may be committed to an anthropocentric point of view. And that may be Leopold's basic problem. And that's why he can eloquently, using his talent as a writer, he can eloquently refer to something like the biotic rights of a wolf pack or something, but he can't support it. All right, maybe that, because he's accepted Darwin. Perhaps once you accept Darwin's account of morality, then you're an anthropocentrist, and that is a puzzle for you guys to begin dwelling on. All right, but at the same time, okay, so this is this tension, right? He seems to be an anthropocentrist by accepting Darwin's account of morality. But he also seems to insist that under his land ethic, land, air, water, and wildlife are holders of rights, have moral status, independent, direct moral status. All right? Leopold insists that the land ethic recognizes direct, independent moral status in land, air, water, wildlife. Although he does not use the term, Leopold seems to insist that every member of every biotic community has intrinsic value. And this doesn't fit in Darwin's evolutionary account of ethics. It might. I don't know. I don't want to prejudge it. This is very difficult to contemplate. But under Darwin's evolutionary account of ethics, moral norms are necessarily, and they may be, I shouldn't say are necessarily, may be anthropogenic and anthropocentrist. How can an anthropogenic and anthropocentrist environmental ethic recognize direct, independent moral status in land, air, water, wildlife? That's the problem, right? All right. How can an anthropogenic, anthropocentrist environmental ethic maintain that biotic communities are valuable for any reason other than reasons related to the long-term survival and flourishing of human communities? All right. We're just moving right along, huh? Wow. So these are all I'll have to get something together for Thursday. But all right, well, let's just spend a little time on Norton here. I know you haven't read this yet, many of you. But Norton interprets Leopold as a holist. He doesn't use this term, okay? Again, this is my term. But I think it's fair, and I think it's accurate. I think this is what Norton's really getting at. Norton describes Leopold as a holistic conservationist. Norton clearly accepts that Leopold has rejected classical American conservationism, but according to Norton, Leopold hasn't totally rejected conservationism. What's happened is he's rejected individualism and become a holist, right? And that's the key development that Leopold the man undergoes when he's having his epiphany with the wolf, okay? He stops being an individualist and becomes a holist, but he still is an anthropocentrist, what Norton calls a weak anthropocentrist. So, according to Norton, Leopold never actually rejected anthropocentrism. He rejected Pinchoian conservationism, in particular the individualism and strong anthropocentrism of Pinchoian conservationism. When Leopold rejected Pinchoian conservationism, he became a weak anthropocentrist. All right? And these are the characteristics, according to Norton, and he's the only guy that uses this word, weak anthropocentrism. It's Norton's word. So, anyway, but this is how he describes a weak anthropocentrist. Holistic, ecologically informed, but still anthropocentric view of what constitutes a morally right natural resource policy. Long-sighted anthropocentrism. The best natural resource policy is the one which ensures the long-term flourishing of the human community. 20th and 21st century biology and ecology inform us that respect for and protection of ecological wholes is best for the long-term survival of the human community. All right? So morally right natural resource management treats ecological wholes as though they are valuable. That's the key word, as though. But they are not actually ends in themselves. They can't be, from Norton's point of view. So Norton really has something in common kind of with Baxter too, really. Although Norton's, Norton's Leopoldian too, and Baxter's not at all. But anyway, so morally right natural resource, but we are morally obligated to treat ecological wholes as though they are ends in themselves. That's, that's the long-sighted anthropocentric perspective. All right. So Leopold, according to Norton, Leopold rejects non-anthropocentrism. So Norton then implies that Leopold did not actually have an epiphany when he watched that wolf die. An epiphany is an experience of sudden and striking realization. The term is usually used to describe scientific breakthroughs and religious or philosophical discoveries. The term can also apply to any situation in which an enlightening realization allows a problem or situation to be understood from a new and deeper perspective. Norton argues that Leopold actively promoted predator eradication until 1933, all right? And he stood there watching the wolf die around 1909. Keeps pushing back. First I said it was 1912, and earlier I said it was 1910, and I guess it's 1909. Anyway, according to Norton, Leopold did not reach his breakthrough realization about the land ethical wrongness of predator eradication until after 1933. And so, and Leopold really kind of suggests both, right? I mean, he says, I realized then, right? That's key. I realized then, and I have known ever since, that neither the wolf nor the mountain agreed with such a view. Right? The view that shooting wolves is a good idea. So Leopold, he leads you to think that, okay, he realized it then, but then you might ask him, well, Uncle Aldo, how come you kept working in the predator eradication program? And Norton takes that seriously. Norton takes the fact that he kept working in the predator eradication program seriously, and Norton concludes that really, although Leopold is speaking allegorically and metaphorically in his essay, Thinking Like a Mountain, what really happened was that Leopold just came through years and years of experience working in the field, right? Of being on the ground in forests, on rangelands, in ecosystems. He came to realize that, that the unintended consequences of predator eradication were so significant that it was just a bad idea, right? They didn't realize that what would happen, right? And that's why he describes in whatever the word, in subsequent years, I've seen state after state extirpate its wolves, right? And I've seen, the newly wolfless mountain, right? The wolves are gone. What happens is the mountain gets stripped of all its vegetation by a deer herd that's overpopulating the mountain. And so the hippy-dippy interpretation is that, wow, man, he became a non-anthropocentrist, right? He accepted a new metaphysic, right? He made some exotic metaphysical commitments, right? It became a non-anthropocentrist. The more